up this question right now.
Very, very important point, Chris. It is almost as though you either read War Notes or read my open to set me up in this way. You are a true professional and a true friend.
I only benefit from your example, and I look forward to it.
And I from your lead-in. Good seeing you, Chris. As always, tonight, President Donald Trump, as Chris alluded to, took a major step back in his trade war with China. Some will call it the art of the cave. Those are the people, Chris, we're talking about, who just want to blame one side or the other. It is far too early to say that. But one thing is for sure. Beijing is very happy tonight, and so is Wall Street. Stock futures jumped this evening shortly after Trump had this to say in the Oval Office.
I'm not going to say, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice. 145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high.
I have not read the book, The Art of the Deal, lately. I've read it a few times. But I don't remember any part of the book that would have said this is a good move. Trump is giving away his position, or part of his position, and not getting anything in return. He stepped back first. A week ago, we went all in on confronting China. We went through it on this show. Short-term pain for confronting a country that steals, lies, cheats, bullies, commits genocide, among other things. And as Chris pointed out, has absolutely no problem killing its own people. And probably killing Americans too. And stealing all of our tech. So why are we going to be nice to them now? Trump wants us all to believe that the pain is about deals and getting better deals. Perfectly reasonable goal. Yet we, the stock market, our allies, China, and others have no idea what exactly the deals are that Trump is really after. Trump doesn't want to reveal his goals, fine, because two things. Doesn't want to give away his hand. Also, may not be able to meet them. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. Trump is not setting clear goals for a reason. Virtually whatever he gets, he can claim is a win, but he's fighting against time. The longer this goes on, the more uncertainty, the more market craziness, the more layoffs, the better deals he needs to get to make it worth it. The longer he holds out, the more time that goes on, the more desperate he is for deals, and he needs deals in the plural sense with dozens of countries. So this is where the problem comes for the art of the deal. Right now, it's hard to figure out how Donald Trump has a winning hand with this exception. America is still the indispensable nation. We are still the indispensable economy. So far, Trump supporters have stayed with him, and probably some folks who are Trump agnostic, especially non-college educated white men. Trump's MAGA faithful want to get even. They have nothing left to lose, headlines The Telegraph. The Telegraph went to a place that's important for us to understand, McDowell County. There they interviewed, as you see, a resident in McDowell County. We're already so poor and we're already so stressed in this country and in this state at this point, we hardly won't notice. There are hundreds of McDowell counties in this country. These small town Americans back Trump even when the rest of the country, when the Washington elite here tells them not to. And here's why. The current global system and both parties in the United States screwed these towns and these people over for decades. Trump promises to help them. Trump promises to fight for them. New polling from NBC perfectly captures what we're talking about. Trump's overall approval rating is 47%. But among white working class men who don't hold a college degree, his approval is 69%. They believe, rightly or wrongly, that Trump is in their corner. He is going to bring better deals for them. And when it boils down to it, they're optimistic the trade war, however long it goes, is going to work out.
President Trump has thrown us a lifeline.
It's so important for the American worker to get a fair and level playing field.
We've actually been inundated with our customers calling in now looking to buy wire from us once again.
We know that tariffs will influence these companies to do the right thing and reinvest in this country.
What I see coming is more markets for us, honestly.
Not a word about the stock market from any of them. Because the market is not the metric we should be looking at. It's going to be up huge tomorrow. It was up big today. In the end, Trump is going to be judged on what he says he does best. make deals. We begin tonight with Buck Sexton, co-host of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, and a Kasparian, executive producer and host of The Young Turks. Glad to see both of you. Buck, start with you. Why are we being nice to China now?
Why are we being nice to China now?
That's what President Trump said. We are going to be very nice.
That's the question? Oh, well, okay. Yeah, well, that's Trump being Trump, which is that he sees this as a negotiation where he's going to say things that get media attention, but the real work is being done behind closed doors. It's being done by people like Scott Bessent and others. Sure. And I think that the desire to, I mean, even me sitting here like, wait, we're being nice to China? Trust me, we're actually not being nice to China, but he's leaving open the door in a very Trumpian fashion of getting some kind of better trade deal. Look, I would say this, if we're going to jump into China right away, in the first administration, people were complaining a lot about a trade war, and then people paid more attention when it came to China and recognized that we were already in a trade war, one that had been lasting for a long time. It was just a one-way war. China was stealing intellectual property. China was breaking every agreement of the World Trade Organization. China was doing all the stuff they promised they wouldn't do. And Biden didn't really change those policies. So I think that's that's
a good point.
A vote of confidence for the continuation of at least the China.
Do you think I'm wrong when I said, though, that Trump backed off without getting anything? The whole thing was we're going to 145% tariffs. There was all this stuff. Then Scott Bessent said this can't continue today. He backed off, and then Trump in the Oval Office backed off. What did he get for all that? What's China doing for us now?
Well, he's trying to shake things up, and he's looking at a system that he thinks has been rotting for a long time and that has hurt particularly working class Americans, the Rust Belt. You can even go back to his messaging in the 2016 campaign, by the way, where he actually had a fair amount of crossover with Bernie Sanders on the abandoning of American workers and what that had done, and globalization and some of the way the trade agreements play into this. So look, I think it's too early to judge how well or not well any of this has gone. The market fluctuates. That's nonsense. It's not anything that anybody should be worried about in any systemic way. And I think that addressing these things is going to require a little bit of patience. He's got 90 days. And by the way, if he's wrong, they're going to get slaughtered in the midterms. And we all know that. So it's not like there isn't some check on this, but I would not bet against Trump.
No, that has been a safe bet over the past 10 years. And are we to believe, and I think that was really an important quote from this fella in McDowell County, we're already so poor, we're already so stressed in this country and in this state, at this point we won't hardly notice. Have Democrats lost any chance to win back working class Americans?
I mean, they certainly have if they refuse to listen to these folks and what they've been dealing with for decades in America. Like, I actually have a lot of empathy for that viewpoint because these are Americans who have been completely neglected for such a long time. And look, while, you know, there's a lot of negative commentary among politicians in regard to China these days, we can't lose sight of the fact that our political elite in America created this problem in the first place. They were very happy to ship jobs, allow corporations to exploit cheap labor abroad, especially in China. And basically, as American wages remained stagnant for decades as a result of this, as Americans lost jobs, as the Rust Belt was gutted, all we heard was, well, you're getting your cheap goodies, right? We're a consumer country. And we turned into a service economy where most of the jobs available to American workers are in the service sector. And so, again, I feel a lot of empathy for the folks that we heard from in the videos that you played. At the same time, I think, you know, tariffs make a lot of sense if you do them strategically. And I think Trump kind of bit off more than he could chew by implementing these massive reciprocal tariffs across the board, then backed away from them. By that point, I think President Xi in China realized, okay, I can call his bluff and I'm not going to cave to Trump's demands. He didn't cave to Trump's demands. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing a softening of Trump's tone. But do I think that he could move forward and implement tariffs that make sense? Absolutely. He did it in his first term in regard to China.
Buck, I think Anna makes a great point here, that Trump has softened unilaterally. The things he said he was going to do to China, he's not doing anymore. We on this program laid into why it is so important to confront China. Among the many things we put up, this picture, we've been showing it to our viewers for 3 years. It is the trains taking the Uyghurs to concentration camps where they are going to be either turned into slave labor, they are going to be tortured, killed, or all of the above. That's China on the left, Nazi Germany on the right. Again, I don't understand, and I'm trying to figure out, rather than just not betting against Trump, why all of a sudden Trump is backing off from China without getting anything meaningful in return.
Well, because it's still ongoing. The negotiation is something that it's a live deal, if you will. He's given this 90-day pause, for example, so that he can try to push and he can try to do what he thinks is going to bring about the best results. It's a little bit like we're judging. So
you don't think Xi's? Okay, so hold on. I'm just going to put a bow. Hold on. Let me put a bow on this. You don't think Xi's emboldened tonight? You think I'm wrong in that?
No, I don't think that Xi thinks for 1 second that he knows what Donald Trump is going to wake up tomorrow and say or tweet or anything else. And by the way, I talk to people, as I know you do too, who are around Trump day in and day out in this White House and advising him on all of this. And I'm texting with them and I'm talking to them. And, you know, Trump is Trump, right? So Xi Jinping has not figured out the way to deal with Donald Trump. He has been calling out China for its behavior on trade for a long time. By the way, you brought up another point about the Uyghurs and the concentration camps. Of course, that's all horrific. It is real. The human rights abuses are appalling. And to the point that Anna made a few minutes ago, elite capture in this country, particularly of multinational corporations, has been so effective by China that they worry about, you know, being woke here. But as long as slave labor is making iPhones and the Uyghurs are being herded into concentration camps and it's keeping the prices of smartphones and sneakers down, big companies have no problem with that, right? So there's been a huge amount of hypocrisy from the people who are...
Right, and the Chinese were trolling us, putting out the videos of Americans in shoe factories and everything else, trying to make fun of Americans. And I'm going to give you the last word here.
But can I just one thing about Trump? Just and I don't want to box out Anna. I actually thought she made some excellent points. I just really quickly. He's the only one that has been willing to do anything about this, right? Yep. So for us to sit here and say Republican and Democrat for 30 years have gotten their lunch eaten by China, he's actually trying. Sorry.
100%. No, I agree. We said that too. A bipartisan cave against China. Anna, to you for the last point here. Are Americans, you think, willing to endure the pain? Chinese people don't get a say in this. Xi Jinping can make them endure the pain. The Americans have to be willing to confront China. Do you see that appetite yet?
Honestly, I don't know. You got to keep in mind that the electorate voted in Trump specifically because of their economic frustrations with inflation during the Biden administration. So I think that there is a portion of Trump's base that will support him no matter what. But I'm seeing people turn on him, people who voted for him, because they don't have any wiggle room in their budget. And so the idea of things getting more expensive, even if it's just in the short term, is just going to be devastating for them. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see. And quite frankly, I think he did soften his tone specifically because he's looking out for those people in his base who are worried about the pain and suffering that additional inflation will bring into their lives.
Well, additional inflation, and then also watching whatever investments they have and that safety net diminish. Hey, Buck, Anna, great conversation with both of you. Thank you. Appreciate it as always. The Supreme Court has taken on a case every parent needs to know about. The right to keep your kids away from sexually explicit reading material at the age of 3. It just makes sense. Audio of this Supreme Court hearing kind of seems like an SNL skit. Take a listen.
That's the one where they are supposed to look for the leather and things and bondage, things like that.
It's not bondage. It's a woman in a leather.
Sex worker, right?
No. That's not correct. No.
The rights of parents versus teachers in schools, specifically whether schools can force kids to learn about some rather adult stuff at a very early age, all in the name of inclusion. The case centers around some pretty wild books taught in kids to kindergarten. Born Ready, the true story of a boy named Penelope. Love Violet, a romance featuring 2 young girls. Uncle Bobby's Wedding, about a gay wedding. Pride Puppy, about a puppy lost at a pride parade looking for things. Some very interesting things, I might add. Prince and Knight, a romance between two boys, and Intersection Allies, which has a gender-fluid character. Those books were or are currently used in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's one of the big, rich school districts around D.C. Here is just one exchange between Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch and lawyers for the school district.
Pride Puppy was the book that was used for the pre-kindergarten curriculum. That's no longer in the curriculum.
That's the one where they are supposed to look for the leather and things and bondage, things like that.
It's not bondage. It's a woman in a leather.
Sex worker, right?
No, that's not correct. No.
I read it.
It's a drag queen.
Drag queen and drag
correct.
queen.
The leather that they're pointing to is a woman in a leather jacket. And one of the words is drag queen in the search.
And they're supposed to look for those.
It is an option at the end of the book.
Things you never thought you would hear at the Supreme Court. Probably Neil Gorsuch didn't think he was going to hear that either. Back in 2022, Montgomery County School mandated LGBTQ inclusive storybooks for elementary schools. Many parents didn't want their kids in those classes or being taught that, so they opted out. Rather than just end the practice of using all of these books, the school ended opt-out. With us now, former ACLU president and Dean Strassen. Professor, welcome back. It's good to see you as always.
Good to see you too, Leland.
Fact, and I'm trying to figure this out because this is a religious liberties case because there were a lot of very religious families, both Christian and Muslim, who said this infringes on our religious liberty. We don't want our kids seeing this stuff, taught this stuff at a young age. Why is that an issue for a school district? If the school district has opt-out, so many parents say we want our kids out. Wouldn't the obvious thing be to end the practice rather than ending opt-out?
This is a very fact-specific issue, Leland, and one of the challenges with this case is that the Supreme Court took it at a very early stage, so we really don't know all of the factual details. But yes, if it's a matter of a few individual students opting out specifically because of religiously based disagreements, that's the only constitutional issue at stake here, right? That you can't just say, I don't think this book is appropriate, I don't like it for other reasons. You have to specifically show that being exposed to the book violates your religious beliefs. I think that's a hard showing to make, but if a parent can make that showing, their individual child should be excused. As I understand the facts that are alleged by the school district, they became subject to so many complicated opt-out requests, not from specific classes, not from specific lessons, but essentially requiring them to remove the books altogether, not to even have them accessible for kids to look at voluntarily, shelved on the library shelves. And that's a different matter, because it's one thing for a parent to say, my own kid shouldn't be able to look at the book, but not to force the school to take an action to deprive other kids of the option to look at it.
No, and I think that may be the middle ground here, right? Which is what exactly is being required of the schools.
If I can say so, Leland, there's been a lot of complaints from my friends to the right of center in recent years that, so many snowflake students and parents were complaining that they were uncomfortable as a result of being exposed to certain ideas or viewpoints, beliefs that they found to be offensive. And now the tables are turned, right? It's more conservative parents that are raising the same objection. And
I never remembered, forgive me, I spend a lot of time covering these issues. I don't go back as far as you do in them. I don't ever remember people complaining on the left about books in kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade. I guess the bigger question is, what's wrong with, and I made a list of some of my favorites, Make Way for Ducklings, Good Night Moon, Are You My Mother, Knots on a Counting Rope, Paddington Bear. We could do all this and everybody lives, and if parents want to have their kids read biblical storybooks, fine. And if parents want to have their kids read Pride Puppy, great. And the schools just teach, look at what an apple is.
Yeah, but what's important, Leland, is that these books are not being used to teach about gender or sex issues. They are just there as part of the reading curriculum. And that's why I disagree with the way that you presented the case when you said kids are forced to read this.
I hear you. I want to play.
Forced to read it.
I want to play something for you, and I think this may sort of circle back. Randy Weingarten, president of one of the large teacher unions, she and I have tussled before on this show. Take a listen.
The moment you have a case like this with such great distrust for what is being taught in a classroom or read in a classroom, I consider that a failure from the beginning. And I say this as someone who is a gay person who understands that we have to actually make sure that families are respected and families are safe and kids are safe and that differences are acknowledged and differences are embraced.
Just to get you past the law for 1 second, from Vox, very liberal publication, the Supreme Court's Don't Say Gay argument went disastrously for public schools. Are we at a point where perhaps public schools went so far in terms of their prerogative of these kinds of books for such a young age, and they were required for a number of kids,
well,
that the backlash, hold on, let me just finish the question, that the backlash to it from the Supreme Court, because we all heard the arguments, it did not go well for the public schools. The backlash is going to actually hurt the very thing at the core that the public schools wanted to do.
Well, I disagree with what you're saying about the facts, so why don't we just stick to the principles? One principle is absolutely clear, and that is no school at any age level, no matter what curricular material it's using, should indoctrinate students. The purpose of schools is to educate, not to indoctrinate. So schools should neither indoctrinate in so-called woke ideology or anti-woke ideology. They should train students to think critically for themselves. And I think that's a process that can and should begin at the earliest ages. A second principle, Leland, is nobody should be forced to do anything that would violate their deeply held religious beliefs. So nobody, even at the youngest age, should be forced to affirm a belief that is contrary to their own religion.
I agree with you on all that.
You're not being asked to do that. They're simply
I wonder about common sense beliefs, but that's that's not a court of law. That's a political argument, which I think is where probably maybe this case belongs. Professor, I always wish we had the whole show. Sometime you and I are going to have a podcast. We can go through all of this. It's good to see you, ma'am.
That.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Leland.
Thank
Until
you.
next time.
Yes. Democrats really want to go back to a fantasy land, and it is a fantasy land, where Joe Biden was in good health and comparing Trump to Hitler worked. Remember those days? Just today, comedian Larry David tried to go back to the future. The comedian published a New York Times op-ed, "My Dinner with Adolf," writing, "Here I was, prepared to meet Hitler, the one I'd seen and heard, the public Hitler. But this private Hitler was completely different animal. And oddly enough, this one seemed more authentic, like this was the real Hitler." Of course, Larry David never had dinner with Hitler. It was a rip on Bill Maher, who reported back to his audience about a dinner with Trump.
Everything I've ever not liked about him was, I swear to God, absent, at least on this night with this guy. I never felt I had to walk on eggshells around him. And honestly, I voted for Clinton and Obama, but I would never feel comfortable talking to them the way I was able to talk with Donald Trump.
Okay, so that was Bill Maher. Larry David obviously didn't like it. Trump is Hitler. That's the party line still in Hollywood. And there's a group of people, especially Democrats, who are still going all the way in. And, for example, Al Gore didn't even bother with the humor.
I understand very well why it is wrong to compare Adolf Hitler's Third Reich to any other movement. It was uniquely evil, full stop. The Trump administration is insisting on trying to create their own preferred version of reality.
Almost like he just can't help himself. I know it's wrong, but I must do it anyway. Forget whether it's right or wrong. It's politically stupid. It did not work in 2024. Calling Trump Hitler proved that Democrats didn't understand where the electorate was. The American people didn't believe it. But many Democrats just can't get to the truth. It's not only about Trump. It's about Joe Biden, too. Here's a candid conversation between the star of The Office, Rainn Wilson, and MSNBC anchor Stephanie Ruhle.
40% of Americans don't trust mainstream media. Why is that? How did we get here?
Listen, we are seeing a huge loss in trust of all of our institutions. Sort of losing that trust is not by accident, it's by design.
This is where I would push back. When I see this kind of insight and passion being directed at the current administration, and the lack of this kind of insight and passion being directed at the previous administration, where, again, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about left-leaning news media organizations were kind of like, la, 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 everything's fine, look, the environment's, look, the economy's great, la, la, la.
Now, according to MSNBC, it is Trump's fault that the media lied about Joe Biden's health. Biden would wander off, disappear for days, not talk to reporters for weeks, wildly misspeak, and Americans were told not to believe their eyes. Everything was okay. But somehow it's Trump's fault that the media lied. Got it. So what about senators who covered up for Biden? Take, for example, Elizabeth Warren.
I talked to the man.
Okay.
And the man is sharp. The man knows what he's talking about. He does the job. It's a sharpness and a pointedness about what he is trying to accomplish. And to me, I get it. It's like messaging. You can have other issues you want to look at, but the heart of it is, what does he deliver? And he is delivering.
Okay, so we need to be fair to Elizabeth Warren, because Warren didn't blame Trump for her version of reality. In an interview Sunday, she once again told Americans Biden was great.
Do you regret saying that President Biden had a mental acuity? He had a sharpness to him. You said that up until July of last year.
I said what I believe to be true. I said I had not seen decline. And I hadn't at that point. He was sharp. He was on his feet. I saw him. Live event. I had meetings with him a couple of times.
Senator, on his feet is not praise. He can speak in sentences, is not praise.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Fair enough. All right. That woman wanted to be president. Here is the problem for Democrats. The Biden issue, the lying to the media issue, is going to get worse. We have just gotten the first of 3 major books about Biden's health. Fight Inside the Wireless Battle for the White House by Jonathan Allen and Amy Ferris. It's a New York Times bestseller. Uncharted, How Trump Beat Biden, Harris, and the Odds in the Wildest Campaign in History. Chris Whipple is next. Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson is out soon. Democrats are going to need to have better answers than Biden was great and Trump is Hitler. They didn't work in 2024. They are not going to work now. El Salvador has become something of the new travel hotspot for Democrats as they go there to demand the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, one congresswoman who was there, if this is really the hill they want to die on.
People, the trial's going to take 2 years, and we're going to have a very dangerous country if we're not allowed to do what we're entitled to do. And I won an election based on the fact that we get him out.
That was President Trump doubling down, if not tripling down, that deporting alleged gang members is his right as president. He wants the political fight, and so do Democrats. Over the weekend, a group of Democratic congressmen went down to El Salvador. Here are some pictures of them. They didn't actually meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is the illegal immigrant from El Salvador, now back there. He had been in Maryland until ICE deported him. They say he's a member of MS-13. With us now, Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari of Arizona, just returned to the United States from El Salvador. Nice to see you, ma'am. Thanks for joining us. What'd you find out there?
So the reason we went down to El Salvador was to continue to put pressure on Donald Trump's administration to follow the Supreme Court's decision, which was very clear that it is imperative that this administration facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia, which Donald Trump himself admitted was a mistake. And we went down to demand answers. We met with the U.S. Embassy, the ambassador. We had requested to meet with Mr. Garcia. That was rejected by the government. We had the family's lawyer with us as well. And we are continuing to put on this pressure because the administration is refusing to follow the law. And I believe this issue is of significant concern. And we are in a constitutional crisis that Americans are taking.
There's a lot here. I'm not going to debate the law with you because I'm not a lawyer. But I will ask you from the political side. Donald Trump could have this guy brought back anytime he wants. Could have done it when this story first happened. He believes it's working for him politically. You all currently certainly believe it's working for Democrats politically. Here's Gavin Newsom of California. Take a listen.
This is the distraction of the day. They want. This is their 80-20 issue as they've described it. You know, those that believe in the rule of law defending it. But it's a tough case. Because people are really, are they defending MS-13? Are they defending, you know, someone who's out of sight, out of mind in El Salvador? I mean, we're perfect sheep.
To put this bluntly, is Gavin Newsom wrong?
So I don't think Donald Trump thinks this is the right move politically. I think Donald Trump is afraid that he will be held in contempt of court, and that if he were to actually facilitate the release of Mr. Garcia, then he is admitting that he broke the law, and that is something that he's unwilling to do. There's also polling that shows the majority
Hold on,
of
there's a couple
think-
things there. Hold on, there's a couple things there. Just in terms of the release, no one's talking about him being released. At most, what the court says is he has to come back to the United States, which he would face another hearing, another deportation hearing, still in ICE custody, and would be deported immediately. He had a final deportation order. The issue is what country he goes to.
Facilitating his return to the United States is what the Supreme Court said. And the very conservative judges on the Supreme Court also made very clear that this was an illegal action taken by the administration. So I think politically, Donald Trump is concerned of admitting his mistake by facilitating that return to the United States.
I had not heard that argument. That is a new one and interesting. There is this situation going on in a larger sense. Democrats think arguing this rule of law case will work, where you have millions of people who came across the border illegally, clearly in violation of U.S. law. And there's a lot of Americans who feel Democrats are arguing that the president doesn't have the right to deport them.
That's not what this is about. This case, if somebody comes here illegally and they are deported, that happens every single day. This administration admitted that this particular case was a mistake because there was a judge that had ordered that it is prohibited for Mr. Garcia to be returned to El Salvador.
No, I understand. I understand that, but you understand we've changed, right?
That's why you have the union president of the building trades advocating for their union member, a sheet metal worker. His wife is a U.S. citizen. And again, it's about more than just him. If we get to a point where the president can openly defy the Supreme Court, we're getting... I don't think that it should be okay for the president to.
I don't think so either. We can. There's a lot of lawyers on. Ma'am, there's lawyers on both sides. Smart constitutional folks I've talked to who have arguments on both of these sides. I said we wouldn't litigate the law for that reason because I'm not
the Supreme
a lawyer. But let me just
our land, Leland, and in our country that is the law. So
I understand the argument. I'd be interested why this has become so important to Democrats, because I know you're the daughter of two Iranian immigrants. If there's anyone who understands the brutality of, for example, the Iranian regime, Reza Valazezda, his name may not mean anything to you. He's an American Iranian, an American citizen, journalist imprisoned in Iran. There are Americans who are wrongly held all over the world. I don't see members of Congress, especially Democrats, going to visit those countries and bang the drums and demand their return. These are Americans who are held overseas. Do you worry that the politics and the videotapes of you guys down in El Salvador just appears a little too transparent?
So Leland, for me, again, as the daughter of immigrants, as you rightly said, who did flee an authoritarian regime, I know very well that we can see democracy changed overnight. And if we allow Donald Trump to get away with defying a Supreme Court order, he said himself, homegrowns could be next. He said this in the Oval Office with President Bukele. If that doesn't scare every single American, then I don't know when we will hit a breaking point. But I can tell you, in the last 2 weeks, there is no issue that I have heard more about from my constituents, Democrat, Independent, and Republican, about this. So it is extremely important. It is very important.
I have to say, I understand. I agree with you. It's why we keep covering it. I admire the pivot on the question, and you're not wrong. In terms of what the idea is in America.
If your question is, should we be advocating for the release of Americans wrongly held by foreign governments? Absolutely. I mean, I have advocated for the Women Life Freedom movement, for that Iranian women freedom for.
I'm going to cut you off before the computer does, but we're going to have you back to talk about it because I think it's something we agree on, especially about Iran. It's good to see you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we first wrote about this in War Notes. Your chance for an inside look at the show every day. It's always free. Warnotes.com to subscribe. I'll see you on social media at Leland Vittert. RFK Jr. is announcing a plan to phase out harmful artificial food dyes from our supply. So how are my Lucky Charms going to taste tomorrow morning? And what about my Swedish fish tomorrow afternoon? More on what he has promised to do than RFK Jr. Even before he joined Team Trump, he campaigned to make America healthy again. Today, he took his biggest step forward towards achieving that goal by announcing a ban on petroleum-based food dyes, dyes that are found in some of my favorite foods: Skittles, Fruit Loops, M&Ms, and the occasional Mountain Dew.
If they want to add petroleum, they want to eat petroleum, they ought to add it themselves at home. But they shouldn't be feeding it to the rest of us. We're going to get rid of the dyes, and then one by one, we're going to get rid of every ingredient and add it into school in food that we can legally address.
With us now, Vani Hari, a.k.a. the Food Babe. There we go, put her on. New York Times bestselling author, invited to the White House many times to speak on behalf of the MAHA movement, and spent a lot of your time exposing big food and advocating for major food chemical reform. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Normally we would have Swedish fish and Lucky Charms, all of my favorite foods. We didn't want to trigger you. Is everything going to taste different now?
No. These food companies have been making their same products overseas without these artificial food dyes for over 15 years. Back in 2010, there were European regulations that took place that put warning labels on these products, cigarette-type warning labels that say may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. So the food manufacturers didn't want to put this warning label on their products, so they reformulated. So they taste virtually the same, they virtually look the same, but they're safer ingredients. And this is something that I've been fighting for over a decade. And the reason why I have said the FDA is asleep at the wheel, allowing these food companies to sell a more poisonous...
Are they asleep at the wheel, or you think they're in the pocket of big food?
Well, definitely have many conflicts of interest are captured by industry, but today is the first day I can finally stop saying that. The words coming out of...
How does that feel after 10 years? You were kind of called crazy and loony back in the day, right?
Oh, I was called everything under the book, yeah. I mean...
and now this is being said at the White House.
Yeah.
What's that like?
I mean, it's the ultimate redemption. It's the ultimate vindication of the fact that I was on the side of truth, and I'm glad I didn't give up, because when I took over 400,000 signatures to Kellogg's headquarters back in October, and they told us to get off their lawn, Secretary Kennedy took our unheard voices and elevated them all the way to President Trump. Yeah.
All right. You and I both laughed when Kennedy said they shouldn't be feeding it. If you want to add petroleum at home, fine. I get the line. It's a good line. Is this actually going to make any of us any healthier?
It absolutely is. We have over 7 million children right now being diagnosed with ADHD.
And it's not going to cost anymore?
When they looked at the European data in terms of when they removed artificial food dyes there, it virtually didn't. It was like a penny per product or something like that changed. It was virtually nothing.
And my Swedish fish aren't going to be see-through or green now.
No, they're going to still be red.
And they'll still have sugar.
They're just going to be made with beet juice and watermelon juice.
Doesn't sound nearly as good, but anyway.
Well, you want to eat petroleum and coal tar? Come on.
Come on.
Really?
The Swedish fish you can pry out of my cold dead hands. I may have to start stockpiling them.
They make a very good Swedish fish that's without artificial food
I've had
dyes.
it. It's not nearly as good.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
You made the point about cigarettes, and I think it's a really important one because basically we didn't ban cigarettes in America, but effectively we did almost worse than what they're doing to food dyes, which was all the warning labels, all the advertising. I'll give you the last 30 seconds. America just traded cigarettes and then got fat. It's not like overall America's health has gotten better by banning cigarettes. Same thing going to happen?
Well, what we are doing is we're addressing the root cause of chronic disease. We have the worst health outcomes out of any nation, but we spend the most on healthcare. We have to start telling the Americans truth about the food supply, and it started here today at HHS. And
well, it started with you 10 years ago.
Well, it did, but not at this level of leadership. And it's absolutely incredible to watch President Trump, Secretary Kennedy, and the Commissioner, Dr. Marty McCary, take on this issue in the way that they're doing and bringing intellectual honesty to this regulatory agency that we've never seen before.
Next time, we're going to do a taste test with Swedish fish. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Really great to have you. Thank you
too.
Very much. One thing you're going to be talking about tomorrow when we come back. Most important stories of our time. Exactly what is happening to our country. And proof maybe